Tell me something, friends. Are you happy with those Oscar wins? Or do you need more? Why'd they give that shit to Green Book for?
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yanis Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. On this episode, as promised, in a previous episode, I reacted to the Oscar nominations. I shared my thoughts, what I thought were some of the most egregious snubs, and kind of shared my predictions for what I hope to see win the Academy Awards this year. So I'm recording this the day after the 91st Academy Awards ceremony has taken place, and it's no better time to follow up on that previous episode and kind of just give my reactions. I was live tweeting the show as it was happening, so if you want to hear my kind of constant thoughts as to every single winner and every single moment in the show, you can follow us on Twitter at Crooked Table. So I just wanted to go directly to the Oscars.org website, which is where I went last time when I did this. And if I sound a little bit different, it's because I am now a mid-30-something who's wearing braces for the first time. So if my voice sounds at all different or slightly muffled, or I wouldn't even know how to describe it. That's what you're noticing as far as the different sound of my voice. So I'm on Oscars.org, and I'm at the list of the nominees and, of course, now the winners. And I'm just going to go straight order as I did last time. Just before we do that, let me touch on. So there was a big discussion about the controversies with the lack of a host, with the popular film Oscar that didn't happen, with the Present All 24 hashtag Present All 24 backlash as far as the 4 categories that were going to be presented during the commercials. I'm glad that the popular film Oscar didn't happen. I'm glad that the editing and forget what the cinematography, and then there was a couple other ones, I think makeup and hairstyling, and then one of the shorts. I'm happy that they were all presented during the telecast. I don't know. I'm not as well versed in documentary or short films as I should be. So I really like that the Oscars give more exposure to those films, those filmmakers, and those teams. For me on a personal level, as well as they're getting their time in the spotlight, as well as the Hollywood elite. So. I'm probably also in the minority of feeling like I did still miss the fact that there wasn't an Oscar host. I grew up a lot with Billy Crystal and Whoopi Goldberg and people like that hosting the Oscars, so I always feel like they bring a certain momentum to the show. And if you see my tweets as the show was happening, I was hypothesizing a lot and kind of being, I guess, vocalizing my frustration, and that they kept having people come on stage, these great pairings of Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, Maya Rudolph, and Jason Momoa and Helen Mirren, like these great little mini teams would come on stage, and it felt like any of those would have been a really solid host, without having someone kind of as a thread throughout the telecast. I did feel like there were moments where it kind of lagged, where even especially at the end, just Julia Roberts coming out there and be like, well, I guess that's it, bye everyone. There were a lot of little touches like that made it feel less cohesive and more just like, all right, I guess it's time for this. Like, I saw someone on Twitter, I can't remember who it was, so I apologize, just saying how it felt like without a host, it just felt like they were checking off boxes. So like, oh, and now this one. Oh, okay, that's who won there. And now this one. It was just very procedural, and didn't have the same sort of celebrational aspect to it without a host. So I'm hoping that the Academy will maybe learn from this as far as not indulging in as many gags. I don't really care that much for the Ellen selfie that broke the internet, or taking people across the way and having them hand out popcorn or whatever. Those kinds of gimmicks I think are really really cheap and just kind of eaten to the runtime. But I do think there's something to be said for having an MC on stage who can kick off the show with a really strong monologue that summarizes the year in cinema, and to kind of hold everything together, keep it moving, and react when something crazy happens, when a surprise winner takes the stage or something like that, and both celebrate things and also kind of poke a little fun and keep the Oscars from being too self-serious. I think we could have used a little bit of that this year. So going into the winners, as I said, this is going to be, like last time, completely all over the place as far as the order. This one, I would normally prefer to start with like the smaller categories and build up, but the way that Oscars.org has them, I guess, looks like it might be alphabetical by category. So actor in a leading role is actually first, and then kind of goes down like that. So we'll just, for simplicity's sake, we'll just roll with the same order from last time. So let's start with actor in a leading role. So going into here, this was a tough one for me because I did see all the films this year that were nominated for more than one award. So I didn't get a chance to see all the foreign language films or all the documentaries, or actually a couple of the makeup and hairstyling nominees. But I did see all the acting nominees and all the repeat nominees. So anything that got 2 or more nominations. So for this category, I did really feel like most of these were really kind of overrated performances in a way. Christian Bale is good in Vice, but I'm not a huge fan of that movie. In fact, I'm not a fan of that movie. I think Bradley Cooper's been getting way too much love for Star is Born. Viggo Mortensen, not a fan of his performance that much in Green Book. We'll get to the Green Book thing later, as I hinted at the top of the show. Rami Malek's win for Bohemian Rhapsody would have been fine if it was the only win for that movie. I mentioned last time in the corresponding episode to this one that I was not a really big fan of Bohemian Rhapsody in general. The movie, not the song. The song is amazing. So I was really kind of hoping that Willem Dafoe would come through as a little bit of a dark horse, sort of Roberto Benigni this thing, and blow everybody's minds by coming completely out of nowhere. Think At Eternity's Gate is a really solid film, and I think his work is very understated, and it's his fourth nomination. He's not quite to Glenn Close levels of being passed over and losing at the Oscars, but he's getting there. And the fact that he did so great in the Florida Project, I thought would maybe help him kind of sneak in there and at least get some of the votes. So even though honestly I kind of knew that was a long shot. So Rami Malek for Bohemian Rhapsody, that's fine. The movie's whatever, but his performance is honestly the best thing about it, other than of course the Queen music. Actor in a supporting role, I was really kind of hoping this would go to either Richard E. Grant or Sam Elliott. Sam Rockwell is basically a cameo there, and Adam Driver will probably have another shot at this category or another in the near future. But I thought Sam Elliott had some of the. I don't love A Star Is Born. I think it's decent, but not like the second coming of cinema. But Sam Elliott, I think the most emotional moments in that movie come from him. And Richard E. Grant, if you've been following him on Twitter throughout this whole process, has been like just loving the whole, or social media. I don't know if it's just Twitter. He might be on Instagram too. But he's just been loving the fact that he was an Oscar nominee and really very exuberant and excited. And that's kind of an infectious energy to be around. And he is tremendous in that film, which sadly, I believe walked away empty-handed. So as far as Mahershala Ali winning for Green Book, not the movie is I think not technically Oscar worthy in my opinion, but Mahershala Ali I think is the shining light in that movie as far as his performance, as far as the controversy surrounding Green Book. I think Mahershala Ali is like one of the only people that's actually come out of that without any blemishes whatsoever. It is a little weird to see him winning 2 Oscars so close together, but it's also very exciting that he is only the second African American to have more than one Oscar after Denzel Washington. So it's not ideal to have Mahershala Ali win 2 Oscars so close together, especially one for a film that I'm, less than enthusiastic about. But he's such a great actor, and his performance is really strong in the film, so it's hard to kind of be mad at it at the same time. Actress in a leading role, this was my favorite win of the night, I think, for sure. I Yalitza Aparicio, that's a tongue twister, and I just mentioned the braces, so that doesn't help, is really great in Roma. Glenn Close, who almost got this for The Wife, which I do feel is kind of an underrated film. Nobody's seen it, and it's gotten a lot of crap from people on film Twitter and things like that. And I think it's a decent film. I think her performance is really great in that. So it would have been nice to see her get kind of a career recognition for that role. But maybe she'll have another chance in the near future now that she's back on the Academy's radar for this. Gaga, she'll have other shots at this. She got the other one, which we'll get to in a little while. And Melissa McCarthy, same. She'll be back. But Olivia Colman is not really as well known in the U.S. as she is overseas, obviously, for roles like The Crown and things like that. So who knows if she'll ever make it back to the Oscar stage. And The Favorite was one of my favorite movies of 2018. So it's the fact that it didn't win any other categories, including original screenplay, which we'll get to. This felt like it was basically the Academy's way of recognizing that film in some degree. And if you're going to do it, I feel like Emma Stone and Rachel Weisz, which we'll get to in a second, kind of cancel each other out. Olivia Colman is the anchor of that whole film. She's obviously the one playing favorites. And her speech was one of the best moments of the night. She just seemed so humble and so so funny, the ways that she reacted to everything. And it was a real treat to see her up there, recognizing what an honor it is to win, and just really loving it. So I was really happy for her to see that happen. Actress in a supporting role, same with Regina King. I thought her speech was very powerful. I've been a fan of her since Jerry Maguire. I think she should have at least been nominated for that performance, which she was not. Amy Adams, I love Amy Adams like everybody does, but Vice, she did not impress me particularly in that. And Marina de Tavira, I thought was great in Roma, but I don't think anybody, I feel like that's one of the cases where the nomination was was as far as they were going to take it. And I already mentioned the people from The Favorite. So if Beale Street Could Talk this was the only one that it won, and that was a very underrepresented film at the Academy Awards this year, unfortunately. So like The Favorite, I thought that it's good that film got in there at least somewhere, and it makes sense that Regina King, who's been kind of the center of this conversation for this category for a while, it's good that she got her Oscar, because she's nothing but consistent in every single movie, and really is the heart and soul of that film in a lot of ways. Actually, just when they showed the clip of her from early on, and if Beale Street Could Talk, it's you can get kind of the chills and stuff from how committed she is to that performance. So, animated feature film. Having seen all 5 of these, I can say unequivocally that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is by far the best, which is impressive that it beat an anime film, Wes Anderson, Pixar, and Disney. To say that, because Sony's other Spider-Man film of last year was Venom, and that that's not anywhere near any kind of Oscar conversation. Even though Tom Hardy is admittedly kind of fun to watch in that. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse really should have snuck into Best Picture, in my opinion. I think it's one of those rare animated films that it steps outside and surpasses any kind of genre. Yes, it's a superhero film. Yes, it's animated. Yeah, it has comedy and but it really is. It's really one of those that breaks out from the limitations that you might put on any one of those qualifiers to just be one of the best films of 2018, and it just barely missed my top 10. So it's nice to see it win here. Plus, gotta love the irony that Lord and Miller, who were supposed to work on Solo, a Star Wars story, and then got fired, that they ended up winning an Oscar as the producers of this film. So happy to see Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and hopefully that means Sony will explore that little subversion of the franchise. Subversion as in like a version within a version, but also a subversion of a lot of superhero films that we see. And green light multiple sequels going forward, spin-offs and things like that, because there's so many different ways they could take that. Cinematography went, of course, to Alfonso Cuarón for Roma. I think everybody kind of figured that would happen. I was also hoping that The Favorite might sneak in there, but you can't really argue with Cuarón's work in general as far as cinematography is concerned. All his films look amazing, and Roma, which unfortunately I never got the chance to see on the big screen, just on Netflix, and I don't even think it was on my TV. I think it might have been on one of my mobile devices, my iPad or something. There's no arguing with the fact that his movies look amazing. Even if, for me personally, Roma was one of the Best Picture nominees that I liked but didn't love, I do think that this is definitely a worthy win for him. And there was a little bit of confusion last night when Kai and I were watching the Oscars. She was saying about how when he goes up for director, spoilers for an upcoming thing that we're going to talk about, how that was his fifth win, or that he'd won 3 that night. And I think that's because of the foreign language film, which actually goes to the country. So congratulations to Alfonso Cuarón. Costume design went to Ruth Carter for Black Panther, which made me very happy and got my hopes up a little bit early that Black Panther was actually going to win bigger than it did. But regardless of the fact that, The Favorite has great period outfits. Same with Mary Queen of Scots, Mary Poppins Returns, Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Those are great costumes, but Black Panther had to create a nation out of nothing. I mean, other than, you have the comic books for reference, but there's a big difference between what works on the page and what works on the screen. And the fact that Ruth Carter was able to make Wakanda feel so tangible, feel like a real place, and have design outfits that armor and superhero suits and formal wear for the royal family. All of this, I think, went a long way towards making that world, that fantastical Afrofuturistic world of Wakanda, really feel like a real place. Feel like somewhere you can visit. Feel like it was made you wish that it really existed in the real world. Whereas, it took 3 Thor movies, and I still don't really know what Asgard is, or have any kind of idea how it functions, what the society is like. At least now we know Asgard's a people, not a place. So I guess we don't really have to care when all is said and done. So that was a nice win to see Black Panther get that one. Directing went to Alfonso Cuarón again for Roma. Of course, he won for Gravity a few years ago. I was secretly hoping, or not so secretly, I guess, hoping that Spike Lee would get this one, just because I was kind of thinking he might not get the screenplay one. Or I was hoping that Yorgos Lanthimos would get this, even though I knew that wasn't going to happen. I think everybody essentially assumed that Alfonso Cuarón would get this, but it could have been worse. It could have gone to Adam McKay for Vice, or Peter Farrelly for Green Book. So I'm glad that Cuarón, who is definitely one of those visionary filmmakers that every time he comes out with something, everyone takes notice. If someone was going to not upset, but if someone was going to take this one instead of Spike Lee or Yorgos Lanthimos, I'm glad it was Cuarón and not a filmmaker that is completely undeserving. Documentary feature went to Free Solo, which I feel really bad about because I've had the screener for that for a while and I've been meaning to watch it, and it's just one that I've never got the chance to. Like I said, I'm not as well versed in documentaries as I should be. The only one of these that I have seen is RBG. So I definitely need to check out Free Solo. I've heard nothing but great things, so I will probably do that in the near future and make sure I either write a full review for crookedtable.com, or I wrap that into sort of a review montage along with a couple other films. I'll have to see how I work that out. Documentary short subject went to Period End of Sentence. As I said, I'm not really well versed on the shorts, so I haven't seen any of these, but it came to my attention today that Period End of Sentence is on Netflix right now streaming, and it's only, I think, like 26 minutes long. So I will definitely check that out in the near future and try and at least watch the winners for the short and documentary categories and things like that, just to try and stay up to date on what's going on in the Oscar conversation. Film editing went to Bohemian Rhapsody, which is baffling to me and most people on film Twitter, just because the editing in that film is one of many ways in which it is subpar at best, horrendous at worst. The fact that The Favorite, BlacKkKlansman, I mean, all these those would have been the other ones I would have preferred. Vice is kind of all over the place, and Green Book is nothing special for as far as editing is concerned. The fact that Bohemian Rhapsody won that makes no sense to me. So there were a few times throughout the evening that Bohemian Rhapsody was winning awards, and I was just like, okay, that's enough. Bohemian Rhapsody, you got your time. Take your seat and let some of the other much better films win. Whatever. I don't even know what to say about that one. I don't think there's any particular standout here as far as one that really should have won, one that I'm really passionate about. And as far as film editing is concerned, it's just annoying to me that it went to probably the one of the ones in this category that I was least hoping to see win. Foreign language film went, of course, to Roma, which the award I was mentioning earlier goes to Mexico. Cold War I thought was a great film, and Shoplifters I'm going to be discussing on the podcast very soon, actually, so keep an eye out for that. I haven't seen the other two, Capernaum and Never Look Away, but Roma, we knew this was going to be Roma. Roma was kind of at least locked into a few of these categories, and I think a lot of people were really expecting to see it get Best Picture, which I would have been okay with. But foreign language film was always kind of a foregone conclusion. Makeup and hairstyling, I feel like also was, just because in Vice everyone is playing real people, and there's the Academy tends to lean towards you made Gary Oldman look like Winston Churchill, and that kind of that kind of achievement they tend to recognize more than not. So I think everybody sort of assumed that Vice was going to take this, even though to my mind it really feels that Christian Bale should get some credit for transforming into Chaney, since it was him that he what he did to his body is, I think, what really sells his appropriateness or his performance as that character, more so than the prosthetics on his face and on his giving him bald head and things like that. Original score, I know a lot of people were very pissed off that Nicholas Britell did not win for If Beale Street Could Talk, and I don't blame them. That's a tremendous score. I think he did a great job with Moonlight as well, which lost to La La Land a couple years ago. So it's kind of sad that he's lost twice in a row, because I do think both of those scores are great, and I've listened to both of them several times. However, if he was going to lose to somebody, I am glad it was Ludwig Göransson for Black Panther, because that's probably the score I've listened to the most this year, just because it has the right combination of sort of poignant, emotional tracks, and also the rousing adventure, and really gave Wakanda and its characters, its residents, I guess I should say, an anthem that the MCU can really stand behind. Whereas when you go see Avengers Infinity War, as soon as Cap is, I think I know somebody, and you hear the beginnings of the Wakanda theme, you're immediately transported to that world, that story. So and I think Ludwig Göransson's done great work in the past. So if Nicholas Britell was going to lose again to someone, I'm glad it had ended up being Göransson and his score for Black Panther. Original song went to Shallow, which, Lady Gaga, I'm a huge fan of her in general, and I've kind of been wanting to see her get an Oscar at some point. I do think she's way more deserving here than she was of Best Actress, but it's disappointing to me also because The Place Where Lost Things Go is definitely a tearjerker, one of the best songs in Mary Poppins Returns, one of the best moments in that film, and all the stars I love, and Kendrick Lamar is also an insanely talented musician, so it would be nice to see him win as well. But if A Star Is Born was going to get anything, I definitely think it deserved this one. The song itself is not anything that the composition is not anything that I'm specifically blown away by, but it's the fact that Lady Gaga and Mark Ronson, who I'm also a fan of, that Lady Gaga is now an Academy Award winner, and the fact that her vocals on that song are so jaw-droppingly powerful. And really what clinches it is the fact that is the high point of the film. I mentioned in a recent episode with Jackson Smith, we're talking about 8th grade, and Star Is Born just came up naturally in the conversation. And that film, Star Is Born, up to that point, was really working for both of us. Shallow's kind of, in a way, the midpoint of the film almost, but really kind of the climax of it, because everything after that falls downhill pretty fast for me. It's easily one of the best scenes of any film last year, let alone in A Star Is Born. So it's an easy one for the Academy to recognize. All right, Best Picture went. So I tweeted this out right before the show started. That there were 3 categories of films that of the way that I broke down Best Picture. So there were ones that I loved last year, and those were Black Panther, BlacKkKlansman, and The Favorite. All 3 of those movies I think are easily 4.5 out of 5. All of them have something really, really intriguing and interesting to say about society and about the culture and about humanity and who we are as people and how we can move forward with things and how like The Favorite deals into the power dynamic, and the BlacKkKlansman deals with race relations, which, as the conclusion of that film really hammers home, is very relevant today. And Black Panther talks about uniting all the peoples for a common good and sharing knowledge with each other and working together instead of against each other, again through the prism of race. All 3 of those films are really, I've said this before, either on the podcast, I think also in some of the videos I've done on YouTube. I think maybe with the Spotlight year, that year, that for me, Best Picture really should say something about who we are, about where we want to go, and because it's a time capsule movie. As far as when we look back, we're like, oh well, what film best encapsulates that year? What that year in cinema, in movies? That's why I think The Shape of Water was a perfectly solid one. That film has a lot of interesting subtext and things you can read into it. Moonlight, certainly. Spotlight. Birdman, it was more a little bit self-serving on the side of Hollywood and that kind of thing. So for me, that would have been great if it was one of those 3 that I loved. The ones that I liked were Roma, which I think has a lot of technical precision, and the story is simple but has a point at least to make. A Star Is Born as well, same thing as far as well, I don't want to get into spoilers. And then there were 3 that I really thought were either okay or average or below average. So Vice, I just did not think was a good film. I just thought it was all over the place. It took the Big Short formula and shit all over it and pushed it too far and made little to no sense as a film itself, not like a clip show of like, oh, let's imagine how this conversation went. The acting notwithstanding. Bohemian Rhapsody is, to me, basically a Lifetime original movie or like a VH1 original movie about Queen. The music's great, of course. As I was mentioning, the filmmaking is all over the place. It's mired in controversy with Bryan Singer and that whole mess that everybody's tried to avoid the whole time. We nearly got would have been a very exciting, very kind of raw and engaging film when Sacha Baron Cohen was attached. Instead, we get a sanitized version of it that plays loose with the facts, anchored by a performance by Rami Malek that is solid and not Oscar-worthy in my opinion, but respectable, and I think he does a fine job with it, but does not paint an accurate portrayal of Freddie Mercury in the slightest, as far as who the man really was, and really putting us inside his head. And then there's Green Book, which is a perfectly fine racial drama. It's not awful. There's a lot of things, a lot of elements that make it very entertaining, but it's just very superficial. It's just very kind of flat. There's nothing in it that's exceptional. There's nothing in it that's profound. It plays with all kinds of stereotypes, and rather than delving into real character development, just amplifies stereotypes out and kind of placates to the lowest common denominator, in my opinion. There's nothing in that film that hasn't been said a million times. I feel like a lot of people feel this way as well. We've really progressed past hey, did you know white people and black people could get along? It's like, no shit. Why don't we, move on and try and challenge ourselves a little bit? So, admittedly, the script is not good. I don't think there's anything in there that's award-worthy in the slightest. So the fact that it won original screenplay is really frustrating for me as a writer and as a fan of intricate storytelling, and not only dialogue and just the way that a narrative is executed. I there was nothing in that film that led me to think that it was worthy of really any Oscars, to be honest, let alone Best Picture. But at the same time, I'm not, as a straight white man, I'm not offended by what it's saying, but I totally understand why a lot of other people are offended by the like sort of whitewashing nature of the racial tension in that film. I think it is trying. It thinks it's saying something really powerful. I don't think it really is, and I don't particularly find the Viggo Mortensen character endearing or someone I really want to root for. If anything, the Mahershala Ali character, Doc Shirley, I think was much more compelling to watch, which is why I think Mahershala Ali's Oscar is a little more justified. But yeah, so easily one of the weakest Best Picture winners in recent memory for me. I know a lot of people are already saying about how it's the weakest since Crash. I don't know if I'd. Yeah, I guess I would kind of say that. Crash, I need to rewatch it again, but I remember thinking it was really good at the time, and then rewatching it a few years later with Kai, and we were both like, oh, that's like as good as I remember it being. But I also was not, very impressed by the artist, and I think The King's Speech was a fine film that didn't need to win Best Picture either. So is Green Book the weakest Best Picture since Crash? Possibly. I definitely don't think it needed to be anywhere near the Oscar conversation. So the fact that it won and beat films like Black Panther, BlacKkKlansman, The Favorite, Roma, and A Star Is Born, all of which I think are far superior films that actually will bear repeat viewings, and that that have real visions behind them, and instead of basically trying to make what looks like an Oscar movie and appealing to mass audiences who just want something that's like that's the same kind of story they've seen 20, 30 years in a row. I mean, I know the comparisons to Driving Miss Daisy are not entirely unfounded, so it just feels like a tremendous step backwards culturally for us to recognize Green Book as the best film of 2018. I think it has its audience, but it doesn't really represent who we are now, where we're going, where we should be going, and there's nothing profound or particularly resonant about it in 2019. So, it's to me, I mean, I still found it fine and pleasant to watch for some parts throughout, even though there is some cringeworthy stuff in there. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about Best Picture. I've already gone on about that long enough, and hopefully we'll rebound next year with a better crop of nominees and recognizing the right ones. Production design went to Black Panther, which made me very happy because as I was saying earlier, you just copy and paste everything I just said about Wakanda and the costume design, because the production design, the way that the sets are designed, the way that even the CG background extensions, all of that really makes you feel like you've stepped into an actual country that combines sort of fantasy and science and everything. I would have liked to have seen Roma or The Favorite have been there as well. I still need to rewatch First Man, and Mary Poppins Returns was good, but I don't think it needed to win the Oscar for that. Animated short film went to Bao, the Pixar one that played before the Incredibles 2. It's also the only one of these I've seen. As I said, I haven't seen shorts very much, so I was happy to see that win. I don't know if it's the best of the 5, but it's certainly, especially now being a parent, it's certainly something that worked a lot for me. Live action short film Skin, haven't seen it. Trying to find it. It actually doesn't seem like it's on Netflix or Amazon Prime, and since I don't have Hulu, I haven't even checked that, obviously. But as I mentioned, I would like to check that out, track it down, and see what I think of that one. Sound editing, Bohemian Rhapsody. Sound mixing, Bohemian Rhapsody. I again didn't need those. I would have been okay with Bohemian Rhapsody winning, I guess, as Best Actor, which it did, and that was fine. But it doesn't take a lot of effort to mix together Queen music. That's just when you have films like A Quiet Place, which the sound design is the entire point of that movie. Like it does not work without top-notch sound design, or Black Panther, which has a lot of a lot of technology and those kinds of sounds going on, or First Man when you're dealing with space and the balance of noise and silence and that kind of thing, and Roma with all these crowd scenes. Is Bohemian Rhapsody winning essentially, I guess, for the Live Aid sequence, but not only winning sound editing but also sound mixing. I think is kind of ludicrous and laughable, honestly. Visual effects went to First Man. As I said, I have to rewatch First Man. I saw that, and I foolishly went to see it really late at night, and I was sort of glazing over by the end just because I was so tired. And as those of you who've seen it know, it's a very quiet, kind of melancholic movie. It was not something I should have seen at like a 10:30 screening one night when I was out doing writing and stuff. So I definitely need to rewatch that. Christopher Robin, Infinity War, and Solo, Star Wars Story. I wonder if we got a little bit of a Disney split there. It's interesting that 3 Disney movies were nominated, none of them won. I think Infinity War could have gotten this one just because of the scope of it, and particularly the motion capture on Josh Brolin as Thanos. But, I always feel like visual effects should go to something that, a film that puts something on the screen that is unlike anything we've seen before. So like The Matrix or like the Lord of the Rings films, especially, again, with the motion capture with Gollum in the latter two. So, First Man is a fine winner. I don't know that I particularly care about which one of these won. I think they all have their pluses and minuses as far as visual effects are concerned, but there was nothing that really blew me away. Writing for adapted screenplay went to BlacKkKlansman, which made me very, very happy. I also would have been fine with If Beale Street Could Talk or Can You Ever Forgive Me? The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. It's like now we're just nominating the Coens because they made a movie. And I mean, I watched that recently and it's fine. Some of the segments are a lot of fun, especially the first one with Buster Scruggs. Everything else after it, I'm like, it just, I don't know. It's a very mixed bag for me, so I don't think it should have been really nominated for a screenplay at the very least. A Star is Born, again, it's the 4th version of the story. Yeah, there's some new wrinkles, there's some new touches here and there, and the first half is obviously, as I mentioned, much stronger, as in more character focused than the second half, where it falls into just the same kind of almost, it's not based on anybody particularly, but that same kind of music biopic feel where it's self-destruction and they're growing apart because this one's getting successful and this one's career is sort of waning, and all that. It does build to somewhere that I think is very emotional, and I'm not going to take that away from the ending, but I mean, this is the 4th version of Star is Born. If you know anything about those films, more or less where this is headed. So I don't think that it didn't reinvent the wheel. I don't think it needed an Oscar. But BlacKkKlansman, and I've listened to the audiobook of the book that it's based on, I think that story is it's a very interesting tonal balance. I feel like I mentioned this on the last, when I talked about the nominations, in that it is both really hilarious and really disturbing at the same time, and like vacillates from one extreme tone to the other from scene to scene. And as I was mentioning earlier, I really wanted to see Spike Lee win something this year because it's been a while since he's been at the forefront of the Oscar conversation in this way, and I knew he wasn't going to get Best Director because we all knew that was probably going to go to Alfonso Cuarón, which it did. So it's I'm glad that he got that. It's definitely my favorite of these films. If Beale Street would have been a great one too, but Barry Jenkins just got one a couple years ago for Moonlight. And Can You Forgive Me? I like that film quite a bit, but I don't love it like a lot of people do. So for me, BlacKkKlansman was an easy win. Original screenplay for Green Book. The fuck. I just said how I think the screenplay in that is not very good. I think the script for Vice is also not very good. First Reformed, I have a lot of issues with, especially that ending left me very cold. Roma to me is not a screenplay movie. Roma to me is a spectacle movie, a character movie. There's nothing in the particular writing that I think makes that film really pop. What makes it work is that it's a slice of life film. It's living with these characters. It's the performances. It's the, as I mentioned earlier, it's the production design. It's things like that. It's creating an aesthetic and a mood, and that's something that Cuarón is really good at. So not necessarily in this case the screenplay. I don't think it's as it's not as rich as some of these other ones. I was obviously really hoping for The Favorite. I think the fact that film works like BlacKkKlansman, has such a mix of tones where it's like sort of a period piece style of like a Mean Girls-esque satire, but it also has like a lot of darkness to it. It's rich, three rich characters that we all care about, that we all understand, and that we all kind of at varying points want to see succeed in their objectives. And that you're constantly, that was one of those films that I was super engaged with the entire time. Like, I don't even think I got up to go to the bathroom, because I've actually watched that on a screener as well for the holiday binge in December when I wrote all these reviews, and I was just completely locked in and completely into it the whole time. I don't think there was one moment or sequence in that film that I was disinterested or getting bored, or where it was overstaying its welcome. There was consistently impressive what Deborah Davis and Tony McNamara were pulling off in that film, and the fact that it did not win is a real bummer to me. So that's the end of the categories here. As in summation, it was a very mixed bag of a night. I think, there was a lot of good stuff that did win. Lady Gaga's performance with Bradley Cooper and subsequent speech and win for Best Original Song was a standout. Olivia Colman, as I mentioned, for Best Actress. Spike Lee, and the fact that not only did he win for Best Adapted Screenplay for BlacKkKlansman, finally getting his first Oscar, but the fact that it was presented to him by Samuel L. Jackson, who also, may I add, had tremendous chemistry with Brie Larson, which makes me even more excited to see Captain Marvel in about a week or so. It was kind of an all over the place Oscar. I think at this point, even the most ardent Oscar fans are really just glad this award season is over. It has been insanely chaotic between the host drama, the popular film situation, the idea about presenting certain awards during the commercial breaks, and not nobody really knowing what the hell was going on. Just it was very let's just say this. It was very entertaining for Kai to sit next to me and watch me get either super excited or super pissed off every other 5 minutes as the ceremony was on. So, I'm really I'm just glad to be past all of this. And, it's unfortunate that Green Book ended up walking away with the top prize. But there were a lot of worthy wins that happened that night, last night. So, I'm just glad we could put this past us and move forward. Hopefully, I think this does represent a little bit of a changing of the guard in the Academy. We're seeing a lot more diversity there. It feels like for a while, it felt like everybody up there was either black or a woman or Asian, and there was like a wide spread of films getting nominated and or winning. We also Latin. We have, of course, Cuarón and Roma. A wider spread of stories being recognized at the Academy. Not everything necessarily fits into your little Oscar film boxes. So I think that is definitely a good thing. We're starting to see things progress a little more in that direction. It just feels like we're going through a little bit of a growing pains period right now that, may bear more satisfying Oscar telecasts in the years to come. So let me know what you thought about the Academy Awards. You can reach me on Twitter at Crooked Table. I know I always have the outro where I go into all that as well. Normally, this is a show where we talk about a certain film that's selected by whichever guest we have that week. So stay tuned for other episodes coming up in the weeks to come. If this is your first one listening to the Crooked Table podcast, it's usually not just me rambling on for what it looks to be about 45 minutes. But I had to take this opportunity, and, I've been watching the Oscars I've been hardcore into the Oscars since Titanic won that year. So, it's like my Super Bowl in a lot of ways. And I just wanted to take this opportunity and just kind of vent about what I liked and what I didn't like at the show last night. And just let me know what you thought, which winners you were happy to see. Are you Team Green Book? And if so, do we have to fight, or can we just agree to disagree? So that'll be all for the Crooked Table podcast this week. This is actually not the main podcast this week. There's one that was just posted earlier today. So You can check that one out and get a taste of what the show is usually like, and hopefully stick around for more exciting conversations to come. We're going to be talking about shoplifters, as I mentioned in an upcoming episode, and I have a bunch of other exciting ideas in the queue for new episodes, new guests to bring on. So stay tuned for that. And thanks for listening to the Crooked Table Podcast. Catch you next time. If you're interested in joining me on the show to chat about one of your favorite films, head on over to crookedtable.com/guest. Or you can consider supporting the show at patreon.com/crookedtable. Of course, you can always find more podcasts, reviews, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. Until next time, this has been the Crooked Table Podcast, and I've been Rob.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
CROOKED.